Samsoni, Samsoni we, Samsoni.
Let me just give you one quick example. You have emergent asset management out of England, which in investment conferences was boasting that if you invest in a private equity fund, as we buy a plant in Mozambique, in Swaziland, in South Africa, you'll still make money. And they even said, we can be moronic, I'm quoting the CEO, we can be moronic and not grow food and we will make money. Now the way these morons plan to make money is not by growing food, as they said, but through land speculation. They do the dirty job of getting the people off the land, very often through widespread human rights violations, and then turn around and sell it to the next speculator who comes in and sets up a palm oil plantation. So if you're talking about food security, I don't know if you've heard about the ongoing protests in Ethiopia, which have put the country at the tipping point, a political crisis where the government might fall, which would be a good thing to happen. A minority controls 100% of parliament seats there. But this is all about because millions of people are being forcefully displaced from their lands. So the Indian companies, the Malaysian companies, the Turkish companies can take over their lands to grow food for export. And this is a country where 18 million people in 2016 are requesting food aid. So imagine trucks of food aid coming into Ethiopia while trucks full of flowers grown by Karaguri, which actually failed, are going out of Ethiopia. How do you explain that the system works and will feed the world? So we have to look at the evidence, not the rhetoric. First of all, sorry, I need to mention our own publications, but we have put out publications which mention some of the private equity funds, especially in the United States. You have Terra, for instance, where most of the nurses, doctors, lecturers have their retirement money, and Miguel, I'm sure you're on top of that and watching out. They're one of the worst land grabbers in Latin America and in the United States. So there are ways to get informed. I mean, the biggest thing is first we have to want to get informed. As I said, our research also showed that university endowments, Harvard University, which is the largest endowment, had invested $500 million in emergent asset management, the morons that I mentioned earlier. When we disclosed that, the university students mobilized and they had to pull out their $500 million. Vanderbilt University had invested $30 million in the same fund. Our expose led to students mobilizing and they were forced to pull out their money as well. So we have a lot of power because the money, the dirtiness of the money is unfortunately coming from our part of the world.
Et donc lui-même, son propre papa, là où il a été enterré, le lotissement va diviser la tombe en deux et il ne verra plus la tombe de son papa si ça se met en place. Il dit que lui, comme ça, toute son histoire, tout ce travail depuis les années qu'il a fait, il a eu toutes sortes de menaces, toutes sortes de souffrances compte tenu des spéculations.
The agroecological movement is trying to counteract the land grabbing and all these dispossessing activities by multinationals through land occupations, through governments that are elected to promote land reform. And so there's hope in the sense that as farmers get united, if he belongs to a social movement of other farmers, they'll be stronger to defend the land. So in Brazil, for example, the MST movement has more than 10 million hectares in their hands through occupations, but organized social movements, right, with many, many people. The bypass basically is, because what happens with, and with all due respect, with the organic farming movement or the slow food movement or the fair trade movement is that basically you try to work within the windows that capitalism leaves. And once you get in there, then you're basically playing by the rules of capitalism. So that's what we call the reformists. The reformists are the people that work within the system, try to take advantage of certain windows, but at the end you start with very nice ideas, but at the end that you end up subjugated to capitalism, and then your clients are just the typical people that have been always privileged. And nothing wrong with that, but that's the reality. Then you have the transformations. The transformation is that overthrow capitalism is going to be difficult, but you can create markets that are solidarious. And those can be done through different arrangements between people and consumers. For example, in southern Brazil, you have the Ecovida. It's a huge network of consumers and farmers. In some places, you have local farmers that get elected as mayors, and then they decide that 30% or 40% of the food that the farmers produce goes to the social markets, for the schools, for the hospitals, or farmers that sell their produce cheaper than organic, all those agroecological, because they feel that they have a different relationship with the area. I know one farmer in Colombia, for example, that he sells his produce, all agroecological, with the same prices as 2010. And he says, I already make enough money and my clients are poor people. Why should I raise the funds? They need the food. I get enough from them. So as Anuradha was saying, not everybody thinks capitalistically. And you can work within the system by creating the systems that are more based on solidarity, more based on other ideas. So that's I think that one of the new thrusts of agroecology. But it has to be also very important that the consumers understand that eating is an ecological and political act. And that therefore the consumers play a major role. Because you need to understand that not only the farmers are giving you chivo, pulito, buono e justo, they're also, for example, many farmers that practice agroecology around your cities are cooling the planet, and therefore you're going to benefit from that. Or the water that comes out of the watersheds managed agroecological is going to benefit you. And also the food actually is having not only the typical health impacts that we know because they have antioxidants and all that. Studies are showing now that children that eat this food they have less problems of health, of immunity, they're less hyperactive. And so there's so many other benefits. And if people start understanding, as we did in Southern California many years ago, some researchers from Davis, some sociologists, for example, towns that are surrounded by small farms have less crime, less violence, less drug addiction than towns that are surrounded by big farms. So when you start understanding that farming not only was going to produce good food and keep the bees and all this stuff that is important, but also at the same time it's going to increase the quality of life of the people, then consumers will make a huge jump and start supporting this through non-capitalist arrangements of relationships.
So from the view of the global north, is this just a continuation of the informal economy or system D? Is this traditional patterns that have somehow survived? Or is there a very intentional set of new institutions and contracts, social contracts, that are being established?
Yeah, it's a combination, but you see, I think that the change in agriculture in the north is going to come from the urban areas. You don't have farmers. I mean, in the United States, there's 2% of the people farming, more prisoners than farmers actually in the US. So how are you going to do change in agriculture with rural areas? Here in Italy, they still preserve some farmers in Europe, but in the south, it's going to be a rural movement. In the north, it's an urban movement, but that urban movement has to be in touch with the farming communities in a very solidarious way.
So what does the social market look like in the global north?
Social
What
market,
sort of institutions and experiences that we might recognize?
well, I don't know, but for example, in my university, in University of California, we have 30,000 students. Okay? At the same time, we have a city where Anuradha seems to do this, called Oakland, which has more than, 400,000 people that are lacking, that have food insufficiency, food insecurity. The students of Berkeley, 30,000, their food comes from, I don't know where, from some multinational somewhere in Chicago that brings them pizza and stuff like that. At the same time, in Oakland, there's 1,200 acres, that's about 400 acres of land that is abandoned, that is public land, that could be put into production with organic agroecological techniques for urban agriculture. And then that would supply not only food for the people in Oakland that need it, but also they could sell it to the cafeterias of Berkeley, of the university, and then it's a win-win situation for everybody. That would be, in my opinion, one idea of such a market.
So, I mean, when those opportunities begin to present themselves, like purveying products for school districts or universities or hospitals, is the social market available to those small producers? Do they have the capacity to sell with liability insurance and all the sort of...
So let me give you the example of Food Not Bombs in the United States. This is an incredible organization which collects organic vegetables and produce, which would go to waste, and cooks it into delicious soups and meals that can nurture the homeless, the starving populations. I mean, Miguel mentioned Oakland. I mean, one of the classic ways to look at how industrial agriculture will not feed the world, but instead create hunger, is that you have over 500,000 families with children in the United States that go to bed hungry. So you have Food Not Bombs setting up stations where they can feed the homeless, people who need food. And so often you'll see the police march up, take their food and dump it, saying that you don't have a license to serve food. So it is okay to create a society where hunger is permissible. It's okay to see starving families, to throw away good food which has been, using the waste of organic materials has been produced from fresh that same day, but they'll throw it. So it is really the bureaucracy that has been created to continue to help. And it's okay to go and buy from a 7-Eleven, this piece of junk, your cheese pizza that they warm and give it to you, which would most probably with all kind of plastics on it and cancerous materials. That's safe. But Food Not Bombs, who will also educating why there's hunger in America, is seen as a threat to society.
But I think that greening capitalism doesn't work. Okay? So Einstein said you cannot solve the problem with the same mentality that created it. So if the feds, open windows for urban agriculture, it's for a certain agenda. It's just to basically maintain the status quo, maybe quiet down some people that are revolting. But that's why I make the distinction between the reformist and the transformist. And agroecology, in my opinion, is on the side of the transformist. And that's where the challenge is for the next century if we are to survive in this planet. If we don't transform, I don't think we're going to survive.
I mean, I don't think I can say it better than you, Miguel. On one hand, you have the farm subsidy program, you have a farm bill in the United States, which has created this food system which is totally upside down and backwards. And then to make you feel a little good and pacify, and thankfully people like Miguel will not be pacified, they throw in a little bit here and there. I think what agroecology, the work of people, these giants that it's such an incredible part. I have to just say it's such an overwhelming moment to sit with Miguel and Yacouba. It gives you hope. What you really realize is that we do know how to feed the world. We do know how to shelter and clothe everyone in this world. We do know that no child has to go to bed hungry. The problem is how to remove those from power who prevent that from happening. So I think that's the work we need to start getting into, otherwise we are being put off the real agenda and being sidetracked.
So we don't engage. We don't engage with those who offer us crumbs.
Because they already control the system, so you have to play under their rules. I don't engage.
You have to make your own rules. You have to make your own rules.
So this is certainly an era in which we do not ask for permission. We maybe worry about forgiveness later.
I think we have to understand that what our colleague here, Yacouba, is doing in Burkina Faso is not just a small example. I think what Miguel showed, I think we have to reframe the debate and the narrative. We are winning. That's why Monsanto and others have to spend so much money in selling the idea that their technology will feed the world. So I think we have to tell our stories, and as Miguel said, we don't engage. We set the rules of the game. That is why Gates and all these donor countries are so keen on pushing open the markets. So instead of feeling the losers, we have to gain the inspiration and energy. And the good news is, it's not just the two of them. They're incredible, women leaders, indigenous leaders out there. And how do we take that message and start reforming? I always say we think, in America, as Miguel pointed, 2% of the population is in farming today. There are more people behind bars than behind the wheel of a tractor. The answer is coming from the South. The answer is coming, as I said, we have just 33 case studies which show millions of people in Africa have found the solution to cool the planet, to feed the world, to do all these things. So let's join them rather than get bought into the arguments and move forward.
If I can leave this last question with Yacouba, per Ananda's point, are we winning? Are we winning this battle, or are we winning this war?
Selon lui, ce qui manque, c'est vraiment la loi. En fait, c'est pour dire que ce qui manque, c'est vraiment des bonnes lois, des bons règlements qui prennent en compte l'intérêt des gens. S'il y a vraiment des bonnes lois qui prennent l'intérêt des gens, il y aura la victoire. Donc, il dit que c'est qu'aujourd'hui, effectivement, avec les différents produits, on voit les conséquences qui se présentent. Et chez nous, par exemple, les personnes d'un certain âge, vous allez voir, ils souffrent de plusieurs maux. Et on se rend compte qu'effectivement, ce sont ces produits-là qui ont des conséquences. Donc, ça veut dire que, avec ces conséquences que les gens vivent, on a l'espoir que ça va susciter des réactions qui vont contribuer à la victoire dans la lutte quand les gens sont conscients qu'il faut vraiment de l'agroécologie et qu'il faut de l'agriculture biologique.